I'd like to welcome all the attendees to this webinar hosted by the Africa LEDS Partnership. This webinar is entitled LEDS Modeling Frameworks, Capacity Building to Catalyze NDC Implementation in Africa. My name is Numi Samakadla. I'm part of the Knowledge Management Team at South North in Cape Town, South Africa. And I'll be the co-host of this webinar platform. The host and moderator is Eddie Awafo from the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology, and he will be introducing the speakers, presenters, and explaining the webinar proceedings. In terms of general housekeeping for this webinar, we will only be addressing questions after all the presentations have been made. Attendees are asked to submit questions via the Q&A button, which should be at the bottom of your Zoom webinar interface. Please mention the particular presenters to whom you would like to address the question to. Eddie will screen the questions and relay them verbally to the panelists. We'll aim to answer as many questions as possible in allotted time, and any questions we can't answer live will be answered in writing following the event. This is an interactive session, and we'll attempt to give attendees who prefer to voice their questions that option. If you would like to take advantage of that opportunity, please raise your hand. Please use the raise hand function and we'll try to accommodate you. We might experience technical difficulties while doing that, so please bear with us. This webinar is being recorded and will be shared on the AFLP website. Please consider sharing it with anyone you may know who would like to view it but couldn't attend. We'll now hand over to Eddie to introduce the speakers.
Hi, everyone on the call. As my colleague has already said, Kumisa has already said, my name is Edward Awafo, based at the Kwame Nkrumah University of Science and Technology in Ghana. Happy to have you on the call. So what we're going to be doing today is to have a discussion on the progress made so far on the African LEDS project, which we've been implementing over the past 2 years plus in 8 countries. But today we're going to have presentations from 2 of the country leads that are leading the project implementation in their countries, specifically from Mozambique and then from Cote d'Ivoire. I'll get into that much later, that the project is in 2 components, component 1 and component 2, where we are doing demonstration projects, and then component 2, where we are doing capacity building or modeling. So for the project in Mozambique, the focus is on capacity building or modeling and how you can use emission modeling to project, to feed into long-term policy making. And also how you can build a capacity locally to be able to use models to be able to support policymakers, and as well as use that to predict emission modeling that can feed to socio-economic development. And for that, we'll have Professor Almeida Sito, who is a professor based at the Eduardo Mondlane University in Maputo, Mozambique, who will be taking us through that. As you might have seen already in the invitation that was sent, Professor Sito is a specialist in forest dynamics with research interests on ecological and human processes, as well as the impacts of these processes on ecosystem conditions and functions. And as I said in the beginning, Professor Sito is the lead person in the project implementation in Mozambique. So when the time comes, I'm sure he would speak a lot more on the work they've done so far and what the results or the emerging results that are coming out from their activities. The second speaker, who's Dr. Alain Quadio. He's also the lead for the project implementation. And in Cote d'Ivoire, we are doing 2 components of projects where we are doing demonstration projects as well as building their capacity and modeling. And Dr. Quadio is the director of green economy based at in Abidjan. And the green economy is a directorate under the Ministry of Environment for Urban Sanitation and Sustainable Development. Dr. Quadio is also a researcher with some research institutions in Ghana as well. He also teaches green economy in the university in Ghana. Dr. Kojo also doubles as a co-chair for the steering committee for the African LEDS partnership. So I will listen to presentations from these two speakers, and then we'll have opportunities to discuss the work that is ongoing in their countries, as well as ask questions, follow-up questions based on what they present to us, just so that we can understand what is happening in their countries, and hopefully be able to adapt the activities of some of the results in our own countries to promote our works as we go forward in the pursuit of our NDCs implementation. Of course, as my colleague in Commission already said, we try as much as possible to make this one interactive discussion. So we invite all of you to come on board for us to make this a lively discussion. Just a quick background on the AFOLU community of practice before we get back to the speakers. And AFOLU is agriculture and forestry land-based and use changes. And then we have the community of practice. What we do is that we have a group of people that are working together on promoting AFOLU across Africa who have interest in AFOLU activities. And this community of practice was launched in April 2018 as a network of institutions that address technical and policy challenges in the AFOLU sector in Africa. And what the platform, some of the benefits of that platform is that, number one, it promotes peer-to-peer exchange among the members, and then collaboration, as well as provide demand-driven technical assistance that the members may require, and then also training as well. And then the members also share best practices tools amongst themselves, as well as resources, and also case studies that may exist somewhere that can be adapted in other contexts across the continent. And of course, also enhance our institutes to be able to foster collaborations among champion institutes to carry on with the work of the AFOLU community of practice. So these are the main activities that the platform is engaged in and doing. Some of the initial priorities of the community of practice, the COP, as we call it, is currently looking at, number one, the agroforestry actions. And then across Africa, especially most in Central Africa and other parts of the continent, agroforestry is being used as a driver to promote socio-economic development, as well as use them as carbon sinks to be able to promote emission reductions. And also try to link these ones with agricultural production in a sustainable way, using sustainable and modern forms of energy resources to promote agricultural production. And then also another priority is using analytical tools to be able to assess our greenhouse gas emissions and how this one can impact, can promote socioeconomic development using these low emission development actions across the country. So these are some of the key initial priorities that the community of practice members are currently focused on promoting and implementing in their activities. Another thing is also to be able to translate these analytical results, the actions and the frameworks they develop into concrete, to feed into concrete policies, formulation, as well as actions in their countries. So the community of practice working on what we call a common theme, and that is how LEDS actions can effectively support both economic, socio-economic development, as well as reducing greenhouse gases on the continent. So now let's turn our attention. So that was just a general brief on the AFOLU community of practice. But now let's turn our attention to this project that we are going to discuss today, that we are going to listen to from Mozambique and then Cote d'Ivoire. So the African LEDS project is a flagship activity or program of the African LEDS Partnership. And as you may well be aware, the African LEDS Partnership is a network of members, governments, individuals, researchers, and LEDS practitioners across the continent working to promote LEDS actions in the region. And it is a demand-driven partnership. So what that means is that we do activities based on what our members need. And one of the things that we are currently doing now is implementation of the African LEDS project, which is funded by the European Commission, the Brussels office. And the project is implemented in 8 African countries, but being led by the UN Environment, the regional office in Africa, and then the LEDS Global Partnership, as well as the African LEDS Partnership, in conjunction with the AFOLO community of practice. And there are two broad set of objectives of the project, as I already mentioned. So the first component is to be able to, we are implementing demonstration projects that will show an example on how we can successfully or practically implement low emission development strategies, as well as NDCs in their countries.
Apologies all, we seem to have lost Idio Wafu. I think what we can do is proceed with the next presenter, which is Professor Maldacito. Professor, if you could go ahead and share your slides and begin your presentation, please.
Okay, thank you very much for inviting me to this webinar. I'm actually going to share my experience with our exercise on modeling exercise, and also in the mainstreaming all this exercise done through LEDS into the Mozambican national NDC, which is in the process of preparation in the last stage right now. My presentation will be very brief. This is the layout of the presentation. Please confirm if you are seeing my screen. Can you see my screen?
We can see your screen, Prof. You may proceed.
Okay, thank you very much. So the background of this presentation is that Mozambique actually has a large area of forest, about 50% of the country surface, but with relatively high deforestation rate. 65% of it due to slash and burn agriculture and fuel collection. We also have an irrigated area, which is not much actually in terms of proportion, but most of it's irrigated using fossil fuels, so causing emissions, and therefore it's possible to understand that Mozambique, while it's not an industrial country, it has most of its source of emissions comes mainly from the slash and burn agriculture. So the exercise here that we conducted included two main actions related to agriculture and energy. The first one was to replace the fuel-powered irrigation pumps with solar-powered irrigation. The second one is to replace the traditional slash and burn agriculture with agroforestry systems. And the combination of the two options together. The first option, which is the replacement of fuel-powered irrigation by solar irrigation, was based on the national statistics of the land that has been irrigated, the major crops that have been irrigated, and the major characteristics of the pumps that have been used and the source of energy used in those water pumps. And we made the projections and the emission estimations related to that. So this plot actually presents the emissions of the business as usual and the tendency of increase of those emissions based on the projections of the national strategies on the irrigation areas in Mozambique, which is supposed to increase up to 50 tons equivalent, 50,000 tons equivalent by 2030. In relation to the area that will also expand with the irrigation schemes following the traditional fuel irrigation schemes. By replacing the fuel-operated pumps, we came to this estimation here, which shows that it's possible, yes, to reduce a lot of those emissions related to the fuel-operated pumps, close to about zero emissions. In this case, we are assuming that the solar power do not have emissions at all. This is sometimes debatable, but we, in this case, we have taken this as a base actually for calculations. And in this case, we have this plot which shows the projection of the total baseline increasing and the reduction emissions in green, showing a tendency of decrease to very low levels, indicating that there is a very big potential actually to reduce those emissions from the replacement of fuel-powered pumps to solar irrigated, solar-operated pumps. The second option here is the replacement of slash and burn agriculture with agroforestry systems. Agroforestry systems actually is a procedure that's used to include trees within the agricultural crops. So this will consist in our case in including trees within the traditional slash and burn agriculture, and also eventually reduce even the slash and burn technology, since the agroforestry will be able to restore the soil productivity. So this plot shows the traditional business as usual with the traditional slash and burn agricultural emissions, which will shows that the current conditions will become worse with increased emissions related to forest land conversion to slash and burn agriculture. But by considering agroforestry systems, in this case, we can lower a lot of those emissions. First, considering that less area or less forests will be converted to agriculture, but also considering that the trees within the agroforestry systems will also contribute to sequester the carbon from the atmosphere, contributing therefore to net gain in emissions. So the net emissions actually are presented here in this plot, showing that by consideration of replacement of slash and burn to agroforestry system, we can reduce up to about 30% of the emissions that are in the business as usual scenario. And last, we include the combined scenarios, which include the solar power regression plus the agroforest system. This will, based in our calculations, bring an additional dimension of just considering the replacement of the irrigation schemes, or just replacing the traditional agricultural systems. So the total net emissions will become like presented in this plot, showing that there is a great potential actually to reduce emissions by the combination of the agroforestry system plus the solar power irrigation, in consideration or in comparison to the traditional slash and burn agriculture and fuel irrigation schemes. Until now, we have been talking only on the side of carbon emission reduction, but the socio-economic analysis was also included here in this case, just to evaluate how will those technologies for reducing carbon emissions will perform in terms of economical profit and also the social benefits. We are using here two major indicators. One is the employment and the other one is the profitability. And in this case, the solar power irrigation shows clearly that it will bring much more benefit in terms of employment, considering that it's a cheap technology compared to the fuel irrigation scheme, so that will provide the conditions for more people actually to engage in those technologies, and therefore also bring more profitability through the irrigation process. When looking at the agroforestry systems, we can also see that the agroforest systems, as we can see them here on the top right, that they represent the best options among the land use considered in this simulation, in terms of not only in terms of carbon sequestration, but also in terms of the profitability represented here as the net present value, and also in terms of the employment conditions compared to the other land use options. So these options actually have been discussed a lot here, not only within the modeling team, but also with the practitioners at the Ministry of Environment and Land and Rural Development, which are the institution responsible for the preparation of the NDC in Mozambique. So fortunately, we were happy to know that all those information that has been developed in this exercise have been taken into consideration by the NDC preparation team, which included, so these slides actually present the information that comes from the Mozambique NDC, which is in the draft format, which includes already the solar power irrigation, and it also includes the agroforestry system and the combination of both, which came, of course, from the exercise that has been produced by the LEDS exercise. And still within and Mozambique NDC, we can see here in this plot that as a result of that, the implementation of measures related to forests and land use will be the major contributors to the potential of mitigation in Mozambique, while at the same time contributing to local development in terms of adaptation and the contribution to sustainable development goals as well. And this is the estimation of total reduction emissions prepared for the NDC in Mozambique, which, as I said, is in its final stage and it's due to be submitted to the cabinet sometime next week. Just for conclusion, I have major 2 points, of which the first is that agroforestry options in place of slash and burn agriculture provide not only increased carbon sequestration, but also increased economic return and more job opportunities. And the use of solar powered irrigation, apart from reducing emissions, also provide increased economic returns and increased opportunities for more people to engage in the irrigated agriculture. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Prof, for the excellent presentation. There are at least 13 people online, and then a couple of questions are coming up already. But as part of the house rules, we want to take the second presentation and then would put the questions together. Some of the questions I see here already are quite specific to your presentation already, but I will take that from Dr. Alain on the work that is ongoing in Cote d'Ivoire, after which then we put all the questions together and then discuss. So if you can please share Alain's screen.
Hi, everybody. Okay, as Professor said, I'm very, very happy to share the experiences of from Cote d'Ivoire. And Cote d'Ivoire is one of the pilot country in Africa-led projects. And this presentation, next slide, please. Okay, I start to present the need for low emission development in Cote d'Ivoire. Much of Cote d'Ivoire's recent economic progress has been based in its natural base, but this stock diminished by 26% between 1990 and 2014. Do the factor include deforestation and water reserve reduced and coastal erosion? And the main idea is that this climate change exacerbs this situation, and we are several consequences for the economics aspects. The next slide, please. Okay, in our NDC, we identify three sector, a main three sector is responsible of greenhouse gas emission, is energy sector, agriculture, and waste. And the ambition of Cote d'Ivoire is to reduce this emission by 28% by 2030. Based here is 2012. And the objective of our exercise in Cote d'Ivoire on Africa-led projects is to have demonstrate activity project in the ground and have a component to the modeling aspect to support public decision making, public aspect to have policy, low emission policy in Cote d'Ivoire to implement our NDC. And next slide, please. And concerning the component 2, is focused on modeling. We have three main actions in Cote d'Ivoire. First, we establish the modeling team with which the lead is the University of Cote, the university, and the laboratory focus on climate fields. Donc, the lead of this modeling team is Professor Yobwe. So The result I present is on behalf of Professor Yubun. The second main action is have the inventory of modeling currency in use in Cote d'Ivoire and choice the model is adapt to integrate LEDS in Cote d'Ivoire to propose some of the scenario. And after this inventory, we have choice two models, LEAP IPCC and T21. LEAP IPCC is used to modeling climate scenario, and T21 to have socio-economic aspects. So how we can integrate the two models. And we are two additional models used in Cote d'Ivoire. In the case of Cote d'Ivoire, is of the tools developed by FAO called Exact, and the CCS tools, the tools developed by the Climate Center of Climate Center Strategy in US, which supports us to assess socioeconomic aspects. So we have three models we need to integrate: LEAD IPCC and EXAT and CCS tools. Next, please. So we have one aspect very important is to have a political task force. This political task force is the result of the activity our modeling team can use by political task force. So we oblige to yearly work with them. So we establish a political task force in Cote d'Ivoire to work together and with modeling team. So next slide, please. Okay. So this member is includes Ministry of Planning, Development, Petrol, Energy, Agriculture, Forests, and some of agency, development agency work is a member in this political task force. During the activities of modeling team, political task force come to exchange, to bring data, to give a vision of the government. So in one of the results I say later. And next slide, please. Okay, so the main purpose of this task force is to lead in cross-ministry policy and institutional harmonize and integrate of LEDS modeling into decision process of relevant line ministry toward wide-scale delivery of Cote d'Ivoire priorities. So it's very important to link the two groups. Next slide, please. Okay, in the modeling aspects, the scenario plan is, we have three scenarios. The first scenario is to transform waste into energy, and two aspects, the biogas and the waste to briquettes. And we use LEAP IPCC to do this modeling aspects and to have extrapolate it, the impact of 2020 and scale up in all the countries. And in this aspect, we assessed the socio-economic impacts, indicators like job, income created, and cost saving, GDP, and so on and so on. And how, when we have a investment, a trajectory scale up, we can have a socio-economic impact on the climate impact, environmental impact, and social, and comparating on the business as usual scenario. The two scenario, the second scenario, slide next, please. The next is to transform waste into biofertilizer scenario. Is to have smart agriculture use fertilizer to reduce or not use the synthetic fertilizer in the production. And we see also this option, we can have an impact, socio-economic impact on job, on income, and so on and so on, and comparative this in the business as usual scenario, and have also the extrapolate impact in the 2020 in all the countries. And the last scenario, next slide, is to combine the two scenarios to see the same thing, the benefits, climate benefits, and social benefits, and economic benefits. And the way is to have to develop the integrate model with LEAP, EXAT, and CCS tools. And the next, please. Next slide, please. Okay, donc as I say, Professor Yobe is a modeling team, leads, and we need to integrate the model from 2, 3 model and tools. Okay, next slide, please. Okay, this is the one of the results. I want to show that the work modeling activities continue with from the team. So the first result we can have with exact tools is 2 aspects: smart agriculture with rice fields, and use biofertilizer. So when we see in the line of rice, agriculture rice, we are a reduction of the emission. When we use smart agriculture practice, we are a reduce of greenhouse gas on 1,060 ton equivalent. And when we use biofertilizer, we are a reduction of 539. Okay, so how the reduction is to 2,143. So next slide. So this plot present confirm the result I say is when we have in a business as usual in blue we know the emission is higher than when you use smart agriculture, and when you use a biofertilizer, we have the same result. And the next, please. this is the balance, overall balance, and we know the reduction, confirm the reduction in the table. I present in the like next the last next slides. Okay. Okay, and this slide presents the scenario 2 and 1 is to transform waste into energy briquettes. And we know when we have this transformation and we have a correspondence like forest preservation and so on and so on, and we assessed the emission. We have a gap about between business as usual emission and emission scenario. Yeah, the gap is there. And the next one present. Okay, the last slide. So I think this webinar we focus on the role of modeling LEDS for the implementation of INDC in Africa. The lesson we can share in this exercise in Cote d'Ivoire is continue. I say in my introduction is first is to identify the integrated modeling can be identify the best low carbon scenario on the national and temporal scale is very important because some of countries have NDC during the COP21, but how we can implement it, how to have an action plan. This is action plan, this modeling, integrate model can help government to have a best scenario about it. And the second lesson is to establish a dialogue and collaboration between researcher and public decision maker. Very important in this exercise. And before the project, researcher work and in our field to have some of results, but policy maker, decision public maker is work develop policy, not collaborate really. And this project and the NDC is the occasion to establish this dialogue and collaboration platform issues. And the last result is to have a clear assessment of primary benefits and have, in the same time, the impact, the socio-economic impact, the co-benefits of the climate initiative. So I think it's the last slide. Thank you very much for your attention, and I'm waiting for the question.
Thank you very much, Dr. Alain, for that brilliant presentation. So at this point, yes, so we're expecting 2 presentations, and these are the presentations that we've heard from our speakers. I know some of you were having difficulties reading the comments or the chat, seeing the screens at some point, but I guess largely the point was that for the case of Mozambique, and I'm not attempting to summarize, these slides will be sent, and at least will be uploaded on the African LEDS Partnership at africanledspartnership.org. So, and also the recording for this will be placed there for your review. I know some of you have already asked whether these slides were made available to you. So yes, they were made available to you for your use. But for the case of Mozambique, you saw what the NASA said, they focus mainly on how to use modeling our analytical tools to inform our policy making, investments, how that can promote socio-economic development in their country. And you saw two major actions that they undertook. But they have actually, I think they are one of the few countries, if not the only country, that have actually finished with their activities on the African LEDS project. If you received their report, and it's a very brilliant report. So it's noticed that the first action, what they did was to replace fuel-powered irrigation pumps with solar-powered irrigation pumps, and they compared the two scenarios. It would use fuel-powered like diesel pumps vis-a-vis solar irrigation pumps. What were going to be the impact? So they compared that with the BAU, the business as usual scenarios, with the use of the solar-powered pumps, and then we saw some of the estimates they came out with in terms of job creation, in terms of emission reduction, and stuff like that. And also the second one was if we were to replace the slash and burn agricultural system methods with that of agroforestry systems, what is going to be the impact? And we saw the figures that they presented to us, comparing the BAU with the different actions under the agroforestry systems and the kind of jobs that could created, and even the impact on agricultural productivity. We saw things like vegetables, cereals, leguminous crops, and stuff like that. The impact of agroforestry system as against the use of our slash and burn method. So I'm sure that we could discuss this further, and also the case of Cote d'Ivoire. And the case of Cote d'Ivoire, that's even a much bigger scope they are looking at. So they are looking at both components of the project. The first one where they are doing demonstration projects, and you heard Dr. Alain talk about the demonstration farms they are doing with rice, and other ones where they are doing biogas systems, and also promoting smart agricultural systems where they are even using the feedstock, the waste from the agriculture, from the rice farms to produce briquettes, which they use to replace that of conventional charcoals for the generation of heat, and also producing biofertilizers from the digester systems to feed back into the farm. So it's more like a complete cycles that compared with. So they also compare different scenarios. I know they are still trying to finalize their models, so that's why I'm sure that you have noticed that Dr. Alain, unlike the case of Mozambique, where they have actually done, they are still now finalizing their work. So you may notice that. So maybe some of you may have some questions. I know there are some questions that have been asked. So, all right. So I noticed that most of them were directed towards Prof. Sito, and it appears that he's answered all the questions. So yes, so let's see if there are any other questions, or if somebody has something else to add to what they've presented. You may want to type your questions or click the raise your hand. I'm not sure how that works. Is Nkumisa on the line?
Yes, I'm on the line. Thank you, Eddie.
Good.
There's a function for all attendees to raise their hand if they've got questions. However, it looks like all the questions that may have been asked, Prof did respond to them. We will include all of those questions and responses on the post communication that will be sent to everyone who's registered and is on the list as well. So if there's any more questions, this is the time, but if there isn't, then I suggest we close off.
Yeah, so if there are any questions, please, let's hear from you. Otherwise, we take it that that is the end. Oh, I see countries. I see Mr. Kalombo. Mr. Kalombo is the lead for the project in DRC. I see David Adegu from Kenya as well. I also see Kwame from Ghana. These are all members of the and these are the projects, some of the project countries. Do you want to just spend a minute? And I'm not putting you on the spot, but don't feel compelled to do that. To just tell us just a minute of what is happening in your countries, or where you are now with the project. It appears I put on the spot, and I can understand how that feels. So, all right, if there are no additional questions or inputs, I would at this point want to once again thank the speakers, our two key speakers, Professor Sito and then Dr. Alain, for your kind presentations and for sharing with us the work that's ongoing in your countries on the African LEDS project, and some of the results, the emerging results that you are producing as a result of this project implementation. We sincerely thank you. And then I'm sure that any of the countries, I know Mozambique and Ghana have already had a discussion to understand what is happening in their country. So we encourage the other countries that are doing similar things. I know most of the countries on the project are working on issues on energy and agriculture or agroforestry more largely. So feel free to keep interacting, and then you can come back to us at the Secretariat if you want us to connect you with any of your colleagues in the countries or external resources. We are happy to do that. Thank you, and then as we will share these with you, as I already pointed out, for your reference.